Well, I'm Susie Clark. I'm a photographic conservator, and I trained in paper conservation and originally worked for the BBC Hulton Picture Library as it then was, and I've been a freelance conservator for about 20 years. These have all been now rehoused in what we call 4-flap envelopes. They're cruciform envelopes which have 4 flaps that come over, so they don't actually use any glue, which is very good conservation wise. A few years ago, probably when I started out, most people were concentrating on the paper components of archives and not photographs, and at that time relatively few photographic collections had had much specific attention. Over the years that's changed. I would say probably most important photographic collections have had a visit from a conservator at some point. Whether or how they choose to enact the conservator's recommendations, of course, is another thing, but I think the situation has proved people are definitely more aware of how photographs should be treated. This is film-based material. It's certainly not ideal and it certainly will need changing, but it's not as bad as the original housing for the glass-based material, and one has to start somewhere. There are particular issues with film, which is why we've been going into the film in some detail, because certainly film prior to 1950 may be cellulose nitrate, and whilst that deteriorates not at too fast a rate, it can, at relatively low temperatures, about 38 degrees centigrade, catch fire if it's in a very degraded condition. So it's important to ascertain in a collection like this whether there is any cellulose nitrate. We've also got these 3 examples here of different kinds of hanging files which are used in the collection, or 4 examples. These are a problem. Some of the earliest ones we think might be PVC, polyvinyl chloride, which gives off hydrochloric acid, and it contributes to and also plasticizers, which contribute to the breakdown of the photographs. But gradually this one we think is PVC, and when it has plasticizers in it, it has a very sort of floppy sort of feel to it. And then, fortunately, this is the only example so far we've come across like this, but this is the sort of thing that turns up in museum and archive collections and library collections, where suddenly somebody comes across an odd drawer of material and it's completely mixed, and that's another problem. We try and separate out different types of material because you could get sort of cross-contamination. At a very pragmatic level, my mission would be to save as much of what is left of the original material as possible for the future. I think when digitization came in, there was a slight, well, more than a slight concern amongst conservators that archivists and librarians would see it as the panacea, and that people would say that they didn't need to be worried about the commitment of keeping the original collections, but in time people discover that the more you give digital access, the more people want to see the original collection, so it doesn't actually work like that. And I think people have more and more get used to accessing information digitally. There's a sense of wonder that comes back about the original material that you can't beat, and I think that will continue to hold people's imagination, really.